Colleen, welcome to the show. It is so great to have you here. And I have like pink sweater and scarf envy. You look fantastic.
Thank you very much. I am really excited to be here too. This is going to be a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love talking sales with you. And I feel like, because we do some work together and because we are, friends and colleagues, we often have these conversations about business and sales, offline and via text that are so enlightening. I can't wait for the listeners to get a glimpse at your expertise. So you have a new book that's just come out, right on the money, that I really want to talk to you about. But before we go there, because this season is all about $1 million mind share, one of the things that is really interesting is right out of university, you started working in sales.
Yeah.
And that is not typical for a lot of women. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how that happened and, what was the moment in time where you realized that your sales ability was going to be the key for you to start and build the successful business that you have today?
My decision to go into sales after university goes actually way past or way beyond just being at university. I grew up in a sales household. My dad was a salesperson and a sales manager and then a general manager. So selling was never a bad word. It was very common. In fact, when we had professional development days at school and when I was in elementary school, my mom sent me out to make sales calls with my dad. So it's grade 3. I was like trucking along, making calls, and I think as a result of him being in sales, I was one of those kids that when we had, a band event or soccer tournaments or whatever, I had to go door to door with the chocolates and the wrapping paper and the spices, poinsettias. I mean, crazy things, right? He wouldn't take any of that to work. And so when I was going through university, it was just natural for me to take jobs in sales. And I had a few friends who were in the life insurance business and doing really well. And the company that recruited me had a fantastic training program. It was one of the only companies that I interviewed with, sales or no sales, that actually put people through 6 weeks of training before before you started working. And that really appealed to me. So it seemed just very natural to go into sales. But that being said, my first year or two, I was terrible. I literally got hauled into the manager's office and sort of put on their version of performance improvement plan. Getting me focused. But I think what happened in being really terrible, like we were on a draw against commissions and I was negative, right? I think I owed the company $12,000 or $16,000 or something. But what happened, in thinking back, 2 things happened. He put me on this really structured program. I need you to make X number of calls a day and, do certain things. And he gave me a mentor in the business. And those 2 things, that structure and understanding the math behind what works and having a mentor and watching Fred work his magic with his customers really helped to create some success for me.
Awesome. So back then, I guess you never would have dreamed that you'd build your own sales company and have some of the biggest brands in the world seek out your guidance for their
No,
sales teams.
no, absolutely not. I think when I finally left the insurance business and ended up in technology sales, I envisioned myself really being, in tech sales, working for a corporation as probably a vice president of sales or something, for a long time. That's kind of how I imagined. My dad was a career, salesperson and manager, right? So my DNA, I think, was 37 years with one company. I never really thought that you could even create a business. So
So what made you create a business? What was the defining moment, the point in time where you ventured out on your own?
Well, it was one of those things where, so the dot-com bubble hit in 2001 or 2000, maybe around that time. And the startup I was with lost, we didn't get any money. So we had to fold. So I was out on my own, a little desperate for work. And I went to work for a company and hated it. the sales leadership was just terrible. It was all the slimy things that we think about with salespeople. Like, the last straw for me, I kid you not, he was standing in front of some clients that we were pitching to, and he like pulled out his fingers like guns and did that. How do you like me so far?
Oh, sounds like Grant Cardone.
Oh, like I probably shuddered. So I came home and I said to my husband, like, look, I think that there's a real need in Ottawa, where I was living at the time, for part-time sales VP work. If I thought back to the startup, I think I can be a part-time sales VP and just kind of farm myself out to a few people that I know who need this kind of guidance. And so we just decided to go with that. And that sort of morphed into, well, Colleen, can you just come in and teach my VP how to do that? Or can you just come in and teach my team how to do that? So it morphed from this part-time VP of sales work into a consulting work, into training work.
Cool. And I'm curious, how long did it take you to reach 7 figures in your business? And was there anything specific that you did that really helped you get there? Because you and I were talking before the show, in the United States, pre-COVID, 4% of women-owned businesses reach the 7-figure mark, and post-COVID, only 2% do. So we know that women who achieve this milestone are unicorns to a certain degree, because there's a very small percentage of us that do it. So was there anything, how long did it take you? It took me, I felt like an eternity. I was a slow bloomer, but like, is there anything, how long did it take you? And was there anything specific that you did that really helped you get there?
So it took me, I think it was about 9 years, maybe 10 years. To get there. It was either 2010 or 2011, when my fiscal year and the calendar year are slightly off, so I can never remember exactly when it happened, but it was around 2010, 2011. I think 2 things really helped. One, it was right around that time, maybe a couple of years earlier, that my husband, Chris, quit his job and came to work with me. And we started to really split out some of the day-to-day tasks. I always had an assistant, Casey, who did travel and shipping and all that. But he really picked up some of the heavy lifting around the technology, the website, and a little bit more strategic thinking. Mm-hmm. I also started to think bigger. In fact, in December, the year before I did $1 million, I went to $1 Million Consulting College with Alan Weiss. Mm-hmm. And I think the mindset shift of realizing that I shouldn't be pricing my services by the day or by the hour, that I could look at bigger packages, and that I wasn't a trainer, so to speak, and that I had value, and I could start charging a lot more for what I was doing. If I bundled things differently and positioned it differently, it made a huge difference. And I think in the first quarter of that year, which may have been 2011, I did more revenue that quarter than I had done the previous year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about Alan, and that Alan was a key figure in helping you to build your business. And I mean, that's why I ended up doing work with Alan. It was based on your recommendation. And I still remember the very first time that I put together a proposal. It was 6 months of unlimited advisement from me. I didn't know how to price it. So I priced it at $3,000 for 6 months. And Alan replied, he said to me, well, it's great, but you have a typo. It should be $3,000 a month. And I said, I can't charge that. He said, you can and you will. And so I charged $2,500. I moved it from $3,000 to $15,000. And the buyer was like, yeah, no problem. And I was, oh my God, how much money have I been leaving on the table?
Exactly. Just having that push, right? And he said to me a couple of things that have always resonated, really made a difference. He said, you're not a trainer, you're an expert. He said, you're not a trainer, you're the expert. And I said, yeah, you're right, I'm an expert. And he said, no, you're not an expert, you're the expert. And that, it's just a 3-letter word, right? But it made a huge difference in the way I perceived myself, which then gave me the confidence to start increasing my fees and packaging things differently being more directive with clients instead of just saying, when they said, I remember one customer called and he said, we need to train the sales team. And in the past, I would have said, oh, okay, well, here's my training rate and here's what we can do. And this was my first 6-figure contract. Is I said, well, let's figure out what's going on. And so we had a conversation and I said, training's not going to work. What we need to do is we have to, assess the team. We have to build a process. We have to build an organization structure. We have to pay them right. And then we can train them and the training will work. And he said, oh, yeah, you're right. And then I, held my breath and
got the deal.
Figures in front of him. And there we go.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I love your book. I love it more than your first book because I feel like it's just for me, it's really, really, really easy to read. And there's so many great nuggets. I know that because of COVID, you pretty much rewrote your whole book. And the first chapter, so for those of you watching or listening, the book is called Right on the Money by Colleen Francis. The first chapter is all about how the landscape has changed. Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? What should people be thinking about right now in terms of the landscape for selling? And I know you work with a lot of bigger organizations. Most of our listeners are smaller business owners. And so can you kind of pull apart some of the things that you think are most important for them to be considering?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing for your listeners to understand is that I practice what I've written in this book in my own business. So while it's written with my audience in mind, big businesses, it does apply to our businesses because I use it every single day. Mm-hmm. So it is
successfully.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a template in here for larger businesses. So the major landscape change that I see that is most important to all of us is to consider that in the past, we used to have a business to business buying cycle and buying environment and a business to consumer. And they were very separate. Business to business might follow business to consumer trends and things over a period of like 6 years or so, but now they're really combined. And while that was happening pre-COVID, COVID really accelerated that mashing, I call it now, there's no B2B or B2C, it's all B to all. And that's because people are so now digitally comfortable that they just feel like if I can buy jeans and shoes online, then why can't I buy all of my business products online and my business services? And while they might not be able to buy everything online, they take that mindset and say, well, I'm going to do all my research first so that I'm ready to talk to somebody because I don't have time right now to try to figure out whether the 8 salespeople in front of me are telling me the truth. I want to make up that decision, that mind up first, and then find the best person to deliver what I have already decided I need.
So the consumer shopping behavior is now translating into the business shopping behavior because we're all people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's really been dramatic in the business to business market because also because coming out of COVID, businesses are still down a lot of employees, right? There's a huge employee shortage, at least in North America right now. I'm sure everybody who has stepped foot in a restaurant or a hotel recently has felt it, but that's happening across all businesses. I was just talking to a group of, larger organizations in the oil and gas business. And I said, well, don't you have a marketing person? And they said, nope, that was a COVID casualty. Right? Oh, okay. So they haven't been rehired, even though their businesses are booming right now.
Right.
So because people are short on time, the last thing they want to do is meet with people like us because it takes up time and they're not sure it's a good use of their time. So they're managing their time. They're also managing their risk. So in order for people to feel comfortable with the decisions they're making, they take control of the front end of that, the majority of it, and then only put themselves in front of the people that they feel are low risk in making a decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the things that you talk about in the book is that, it's basically a buyer's market. And, buyers are now in control of the sales process. What type of mindset shifts do people need to make around that? Like what types of old school, like I love your cold calling is dead, but like what types of old school tactics need to go to the wayside, and how does our thinking need to change now that it really is the buyer is basically the seller?
It is. I mean, we have to be seen everywhere. I've used the term ubiquitous many times in the book. We have we call it critical mass influence. And in fact, Lisa, I realized I use an example of our relationship in this and how it works, because we have to recognize that people are more important than ever before in the buying cycle. But it's just that there are many more people involved. So I use this example to sum it up nicely. I need to buy new microphones and lights and things for my business. And I go to Lisa because she's the expert, right? And Lisa says, here's the brand to buy. So what do? I go onto Amazon, I start looking at those brands, and I start reading the reviews. And I start reading that people who bought this also bought that. And I get down a rabbit hole and I start reading these reviews of other people that I don't know. And I'm like, well, all these other people really said that this was the better brand, even though Lisa, my trusted advisor and great friend and business associate, said A is the best thing to buy. 1,000 people say B is the best thing to buy. And even though they're strangers, I'm going to trust 1,000 voices over one. Right? So I became really conscious of this and started noticing that that's what's happening in the marketplace. And from a sales perspective, why that's important is you have to recognize that the person you're trying to sell to is listening to tens, hundreds, or thousands of voices of people that you may never even meet. And so our job is we have to infiltrate all of the places where not just our buyers are, but the people they're listening to are, so that you can imagine, your buyer is sort of in the center of this mass. All of the people around them are saying, you should buy this. I know Lisa, I know Lisa, I know Lisa, I know Lisa. And that reduces the risk and increases the confidence they have that they will call you or reach out to you.
Right. So you have to be really aware of what the recommendation process has changed. It's not just one recommendation. There are lots of stranger recommendations that are influencing buyer decisions out there as well.
Yeah.
Really, really, really important.
It is, because buyers are spending only about 17% of the time that they have to make a decision in front of salespeople. The rest of the time, that 83%, they're spending in front of all the people who can influence them or who are stakeholders or online reading things about you. So we have 83% of that decision-making time that we have to penetrate somehow.
Which means that things like testimonials on your website and LinkedIn recommendations and Google reviews, all of those things are more important than ever because they are public pieces of social proof that you actually do good work, whether you are a solo practitioner, a small business owner, or a big corporation. Those things all feed into buyer decision making.
Absolutely. And the value, so the publishing of your value is important, and not just to your ideal buyer, but if you have to now think about who are all the other people who are influencing my buyer and what value do I bring them? So that if you're selling, let's say you're selling insurance or financial services, I mean, people will tend to create articles and analyst reports and how-to information for the person that they want to become their client, right? As a financial advisor. But that person might also be going to their banks and their lawyers and other people in their life to get referrals on which financial advisor to use. And so the financial advisor now also needs to write and showcase value on why banks should refer people to financial advisors, what lawyers should consider when referring, or how it affects, so that all the lawyers in the circle also say, Lisa's really smart about understanding how the law and finances work together. You should go talk to her, right?
Right. So you have to understand how it's like a web. You have to understand how it's all connected.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that you talk about in the book is anticipation is the new responsiveness. And I love that because I've always said that, having a sense of urgency sells. And so, can you talk to me a little bit about speed and why it matters? And can you give us some examples of what business owners really should be thinking about in terms of what their speed of response is like?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's a topic near and dear to my heart. um, so we're in a wait, hurry up kind of market.
Right.
So, if you think about it, buyers and stakeholders are doing all this research online. They're talking to all sorts of people. They're trying to get all their ducks in a row. They're building confidence in who they want to talk to. So when they finally pick up the phone or send you an email or return, an email or a phone call that you've been sending, they are ready to buy right then. And so responsiveness is key because it's top of mind. And, they've got a to-do list, triple what it normally was pre-COVID because they've got less staff and less time to make these decisions. So they have a high degree of urgency because they've got to get this done because there's 5 other things that need to
Right.
get done. So we're seeing that 75% of the sales are going to the supplier who responds first. And
75%.
75%. And in one example I share in the book between 2 equal companies, the company that had a 48-hour turnaround time in terms of responding versus the one that had a 1-hour turnaround time on responding, the 1-hour turnaround time resulted in 12 times better closing ratio than 48-hour turnaround time.
I can believe it.
Same market.
Yeah, I believe it because what I would expect happens is the buyer does all of this research and they have a deadline for making the buying decision. And so if you're on the short list and they are a typical procrastinator because they're busy like the rest of us, then by the time they reach out for you, they're up against their own deadline. And that's why the responsiveness is so critical and important.
Absolutely. It's key right now. And so figuring out how you can respond quickly in a personalized way when someone does reach out is going to make a huge difference between whether you win or lose the business.
Well, I'm just thinking about that 12 times example. And if you think about the cost of having an employee who only responds to sales inquiries, and you think, oh, I can't afford to hire that extra person, can you afford not to?
Exactly, because what we're seeing in this marketplace too is there really is an increase in inbound inquiries from the sellers who are doing this right. The results are much better for those who are pushing out the content, seeding the marketplace, being ubiquitous, engaging with people in all of the platforms. And then they get this groundswell of inbound leads, right, that they can qualify and close. And that's much more successful and much more profitable than the old fashioned sort of let's make 100 cold calls in a day.
So my experience in my business, I mean, I do a lot of work in helping business owners really think through their business and their marketing strategy. So the outcome that my clients are always looking for is more sales. And I don't consider myself a sales expert, but I do consider myself someone who is a pretty good salesperson and a pretty adept at understanding the process of building a business and marketing in order to attract leads. I have observed over the decade plus time that I've been self-employed, and even previous to that in retail, that there are a lot of women that are really uncomfortable with selling. They're afraid to ask for the sale. They're afraid to be too pushy. They're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of asking for too big of a price point. So they lead with the smallest option. What do you recommend that people who are uncomfortable with or afraid of selling do to improve their skills?
So first of all, it's mindset. I think you need to change your mindset from I'm trying to sell something or I'm selling something or I need to sell something to I'm helping this person, right? they've come to me for an improvement, and if they choose to do business with me, I'm going to help them. So, so that's number one. Two, I think from a mindset perspective, uh, I I I do two things. One, teach people to remember that your job is to just start a conversation and keep a conversation going, right? As long as they're talking to you, there's potential to buy, as opposed to thinking every time you talk to someone, I got to close the deal, right? I think that that is that's also it's really a critical mindset shift there, because if you think you're if you're trying to set yourself up to sell, you become intimidated by that, right?
Right.
So I think those two pieces of mindset shift are really critical. If you're getting inbound leads, you also have to remember that people are calling you because they do have a problem they want resolved, right? So you're not interrupting their day. You're not being too pushy. They reached out to you, which I think is also a really critical piece there from a mindset perspective.
Mhm.
And then I think from improving your skills. So I think a lot of women are afraid because they mistake being assertive with being aggressive or pushy.
Mhm.
And being assertive is a very professional way of, just asking questions, and then they take it personally, right? When the response. So I like to always remember that my job is to get this person to a decision. I
Right.
am not vested in the decision. Whether you choose to do business with me or Lisa is fine with me, because you're getting the help that you believe you need, and that's a good thing. But I want you to make a decision. And if you change your mindset that way, then you change the way you ask questions. Instead of saying, "So we're going to do business together," and sound aggressive, it's you ask questions like, "What do you want to do next?
Right.
How can I help you decide which is the right solution? Which solution do you think is the best one for you? How are you going to make a decision about what is the right option for you?" And it becomes much more conversational, and you feel like you're not in combat that way as well.
Right. So learning the art of, first of all, the mindset stuff, but also learning how to ask better questions and really coming from a place of service versus a place of sales.
Yeah,
Super
absolutely.
important.
And learning how, I mean, at the end, learning how to ask the sales question in a way that's comfortable for you. I think the most common way I ask for the sale is just simply, "What would you like to do next?"
Yeah. I did the same thing. I do the
Yeah,
same thing. What would you like to do next? Or I will explain to someone when they want to know how I can work with, or how they can work with me, what the options are. And then I will just simply say, so what do you think? Do you think you
yeah,
can do this on your own? Do you think you can do this on your own, or would you like my help? And it's a
exactly.
very soft way of asking, but it's also, I've gotten to a point in my business where, or in sales, and I think I've kind of been this way most of my life. I'm not attached to the outcome. I
No,
don't take it personally. And I think that I can self reflect enough on when I've done a good job in a sales conversation and when I've done a bad job.
yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed that I used to do when I would do a bad job is I would go way too far down the common ground rabbit hole. I
Yeah.
would build rapport to the point that the person forgot what they were coming in to buy. So I think it's important that you
Oh my
build
goodness, yeah.
rapport, but it's also important that you're able to self diagnose and reflect on why a conversation led to a positive or a negative outcome in terms of sales. Do you agree?
Absolutely. You said a couple of things there that really resonated with me. Not being tied to the outcome, I think, is really important, because you can't tie your self-worth, your sense of self-esteem up in a yes no answer, right?
Right.
Person's going to make a decision that they think is best for them, and if they don't choose you, oh well, next time, right?
Right.
So I think that that's a really critical piece. And yeah, we we're here to help people, not necessarily build friends, so to speak. And I
Right.
think women do maybe go down that rabbit hole of trying to build personal rapport um, for too long. And in this market, people don't. Well, it's not that they don't care about that, because it is important to some degree, but what they really care about is the value you can bring. So
Mhm.
I like to laugh with some of my clients right now. I keep telling them it's not a hats and donuts market anymore. People don't want your hats and donuts. They want to know that you can deliver them value that's aligned with the value that they're seeking. Um,
Mhm.
and so, asking questions about what the person's objectives are. And I always say to customers, let's get on the phone and talk so I can see if, I can help you hit your objectives, right? Like I might not be the right person, right? So disarming right up from the front to say, let's explore what you're trying to accomplish. And if I can help you, then we can talk about the next steps. And if I can't help you, then I'll refer you to someone who can.
Mhm.
So that way you keep the conversation conversational, but focused on what's in it for them.
Yeah. I had
Yeah.
somebody recently say something to me about, oh, I think I can convince so and so that they should do this. And I said, if you have to convince someone, then it's probably not the right sales
Yeah.
opportunity, because I feel like when you go all in on convincing someone that they should buy from you,
Yeah.
then you have to keep convincing them that they made the right decision. So I don't want to convince anybody. I want people to, buy because they want to buy. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also think that one of the things that really helps people be more successful in sales, and you talked about it a little bit, is providing them options, right? Like
right.
there's three different ways or two different ways that we can do this. And so then it's not a conversation about, so do you want to go forward? Can we do business together? It's which one of these resonates with you best? Or which of these options, do you think will work? Or, you know, what would you like to do next? Right?
Right.
It's a
Right.
way easier way to have that conversation if you can provide, a few different ways. I would say no more than three. So two or three different ways that they can engage with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, can you talk to me a little bit about the role that marketing plays in the sales process, and maybe touch on some of the gimmicks that business owners should avoid? I really am interested in your triad tempo. And
Yeah.
so, if you could talk, you go into a lot of detail in the book, but if we could maybe have a conversation about that, I would love that.
Yeah. So I think marketing and sales are, even more closely aligned. And in fact, on the corporate side, when I'm working with corporate salespeople, whether it be oil and gas or technology or fertilizer, they have to market themselves and their own brands and their businesses and the value they bring, even on top of having a huge corporate marketing department. It's critical in this marketplace right
To
now.
market your own personal brand.
Yes, absolutely. And how they bring value to the market, small end market that they work in, the territory that they work in. So what we created with the Triad Tempo was a really easy way, because you don't want to spend your entire day on social media or in marketing. You've got to talk to people eventually, right? But it utilizes this critical mass influence that I talked about, where it says, okay, so three times a day on the three types of media that your customers engage in, not what you want to engage in, but where your customers are. And that could be, your company newsletter, it could be industry association sites, it could be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you choose based on where your customers are. I want you to do three things on those three different medias. And some people, I do this three times a day. Some people do it three times a week, but it has to be at least three times a week, not three times a month. Create and post original content. So either something you've created that's original, or that your marketing team or someone inside your company has created that is original. It could be 2 sentences of original content or 2 paragraphs. I want you to comment on other people. So following your customers, or influencers that your customers follow, comment on there. Don't just like it, but actually ask a question or add value. Show that you're listening so that you
Mhm.
pop up in their feed, right? So that people start to pay attention to you, who are all in the periphery of where your stakeholders and your buyers are. And then I want you to share, whether you share something from your customers that they're posting, or your potential customers, or share something from the news, or share a story from the industry association. You need to be sharing other people's stuff, because that's how you get heard by all those people who you might not know, but your customers might be listening to.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was something I saw on Facebook where somebody was talking about something gimmicky, and you commented and you basically said, you just need to create a body of work. Like, stop with all this nonsense, right?
Oh, yeah. I think it was, I find people in the professional services world, recently they've been spending too much time focused on like all the technology, right? You know, I have, well, if you could see, I have like a
Mhm.
Yeti mic. I have two ring lights attached to my computer screens, and I have a Logitech camera, right? And we do over $1 million worth of business a year, and I keynote and train and do everything with this. Yet people who are making, a tenth of that will spend hours and hours and hours a day trying to figure out their 3 camera shoot and their, ATEM switchers, and like they have lights coming in and they're all in the ceiling, and they have
Right.
14 mics across, like, what you need. That's not going to bring you more business.
Right.
Maybe the lighting could be better, but
Focused
um,
on the wrong things.
they're focused on the wrong things. It's not a hats and donuts market, right? It's a
Right.
value market, and people want to know how you can help them deliver value. So
Right.
spend your time writing, or creating videos, or doing podcast interviews, or writing tip sheets, how-to sheets, and get your knowledge out there. So
Right. Right. It's an
it-
attention economy, and you have to be able to generate attention
absolutely.
in a valuable and compelling
Yeah.
way if you really want to generate those inbound
Yeah.
leads.
When I first started selling technology, I went through a sales methodology that's still around today. I won't mention it by name, but they taught us that no free consulting. If you give something away for free, you will never be able to make money from that company again. The entire opposite is true right now. If
Mhm.
we don't give away our value for free, no one will even know that we exist. And so the mindset is, you have to create an environment around you where people say, my God, I learned so much from Colleen for free. Just imagine what will happen if I pay her.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. How important is trust?
Trust is important, right? It's critical, because when they trust you, their risk tolerance improves, right? So decision confidence is a term that I use a lot. We're trying to build confidence in our buyers to make a decision, and they're not going to have confidence in someone they don't trust.
Yes. Absolutely. I had this conversation with a colleague of ours, Lisa Miller, this week. Actually, we were talking
Yeah,
about trust, and we were talking about make it easy for people to buy and close the loop. Do what you say you're going to do and keep your customer informed along the way so they don't have to wonder what's happening. Because as soon as they have to hold I wonder what's happening, I wonder if this got done in their head, you're eroding trust. And when you
absolutely.
start to erode trust, they start to look for other people that are actually going to make it easier for them to do business.
Yeah,
Right.
and a client of mine who I was with this week has the most simple formula for this in terms of closing customers and onboarding customers. I just think this is brilliant. He says, when you're closing the business, you know why they're doing business with you, right? Either the service, the price, the availability, the style, whatever it is. So he makes sure to document that, like, why did you buy from me? What tipped the scales in front of the customer and say, oh, okay, so it's A, B, and C. So my job now is to make sure that as we're bringing you on board and as you're doing the work, that we actually fulfill the reasons why you did business with us.
Right.
And he just it can be 3 things, but he's constantly going back to the customer. Were you happy with this? Because we know that was important to you. And he
Yeah.
puts it in their face so often that they're incredibly loyal. Like, well, that's so simple.
Yeah. It's super, super simple. I actually just talked to my team about doing something like that, like a customer one pager that outlines those things so that you don't forget what the most important priorities are. And I think
Exactly.
it's really simple, but it's really valuable.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly valuable.
All right. So I have one last question for you before we wrap up. And that question is, what is your entrepreneurial superpower?
My entrepreneurial superpower is that I'm fearless. I'm willing to try anything. And I mean, as long as it's legal, moral, and ethical. I honestly am willing to try anything, talk to anybody, you know, write about anything. So
And is that something that was innate? Were you always fearless, or is that something that built over time?
no, I think I've always been that way. In high school, my best friend's dad used to say that I had a killer instinct, and I've always been told that I've been driven. So I think being driven and having that sort of killer instinct, are the result of just being fearless and trying
Mm.
things.
Awesome. So for our listeners, I want you to know I've known Colleen for a long time, a number of years now, and probably close to a decade, if not more than a decade. And one of the things that I like and respect about her the most is that, she exudes confidence. And maybe she exudes confidence because she is fearless. Maybe her sales organization is successful because she is confident and fearless and highly skilled. But one thing I know for sure is she has a proven track record year after year after year of doing what she does successfully in the sales space. So if you're listening to this show and you're thinking, I wish that I could borrow a little bit of her confidence, a little bit of her thinking, a little bit of her salesmanship, I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of her book, Right on the Money. It's a book that has been written by a woman who is practicing these skills and doing it with style and building a successful business as a result of doing these things. If she can do it, you can do it too. Colleen, thank you so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like I could have had you on for like a half day, but I know that's not reasonable or possible.
We could have talked for hours. We'll have to
We'll have to do an evening podcast with champagne.
That would be fun.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Colleen, for being part of this conversation.
Great. Thanks.